Hello and welcome to GameSack. It's been a while since the last Hacks and Homebrews episode, so I figured we could take a look and see what the fan community's been up to. Now, there is a ton of great stuff out there, and I probably can't get to it all. Also, everything in this episode is free. However, you're going to have to source it yourself, and you may also need a legit copy of the game if it needs to be patched. And some are demos that might be for a product that goes on sale later, but the demo is free. Anyway, let's start out with some Batman homebrew. Here's Batman Returns on the Genesis from Tiagasic, Pyron, Engelbart, and Vector Orbitex. No, this isn't the crappy Batman Returns that Sega of America gave us, but instead it's a port of the beat-em-up that Konami developed for the Super Nintendo. It's actually just a tech demo. Only the first part of the first stage is here, and there's no intention to bring the entire game to the console. But what is here is done extremely well. I'm Batman. You play as Batman, and your goal is to put an end to all crime, but only in your particular city. The only way to end crime is by punching people in the face. A few of the enemy types from the Super Nintendo game didn't get invited to participate on the Genesis. Still, this is a great port, and the Genesis here is going a bit beyond the original on the Super NES in a few ways. For one, it runs in a higher resolution in both dimensions. As a result, it looks a bit skinnier, and it's also full screen top to bottom, whereas the Super NES version is letterbox so that it doesn't run at the speed of molasses. The Genesis also puts a ton more characters on screen at once. So yeah, there's flicker, but I haven't felt any slowdown. You can also play two players simultaneous where you're both Batman. One of you is colored slightly lighter. The tech demo ends with this sweet digitized image of Batman which looks amazing on a CRT. Even most of the intro is here. The music is also done well, especially the stage music. And there's lots of extra voices here that weren't in the Super NES game. Everything sounds great. There is some music that was lifted from Dragon's Fury. And the boss laugh is lifted from Streets of Rage 2. If anything, I really wish that I could take this demo, travel back in time, and show it to the people of Sega of America and say, see this? This is what you should be making instead of what you are actually making. This is Find Luigi on the Super NES from Maxwell Olinda. In this simple game, various faces from the Mario universe bounce around the screen DVD logo screensaver style. You control the little heart. Your goal is to touch the Luigi faces. That's it! You can speed up your movement with the Y button. Each Luigi you touch is worth a point. However, if you touch a non-Luigi face, you lose a hit point, and you don't have that many. Up to 36 faces can be bouncing around the screen at once, and it can feel pretty crazy. So far, my record is 18 points in the easy mode. In the hard mode, the faces move even faster. You beat the game if you can get 30 points on easy or 20 points on hard. Despite its extremely simplistic nature, it's actually pretty fun. Not only that, but the music is great as well. Mouse support could make this perfect, but maybe that might also make the game too easy?
It's Luigi time. Wow!
Also on the Super Nintendo is Super Boss Gaiden from Dieter Laser and Chrono Moogle. You play as the boss of Sony. It turns out that the Nintendo PlayStation prototype that Sony was actually working on in real life back in the day has been leaked and emulated. This fills you with pure rage, and now you go around destroying equipment and killing Sony employees. No employee of Sony is safe. Certainly not Parappa the Rapper. Hell, not even poor Sackboy. You need to keep your heart rate up or you die and then get set back really far, but hey, at least there's checkpoints. The controls are pretty tight for the most part, though sometimes it feels like the enemies are impervious to your attacks. Sometimes you get a bunch of text that covers up the action, which is annoying. The graphics and the music are good here, and I do like the humor, but I just wish the text didn't cover the actual playfield while I was playing. This game will also work on your Nintendo PlayStation if you burn a CD, so it might be time to dig it out of the closet, hose off the dust, and spin this disc up. Let's stick with Homebrew for now, because I've got a lot of that. I am loving the arcade conversions that the community is attempting, usually with amazing results. So let's take a look at some of them. Here's Shinobi on the Genesis from Trifon. Shinobi? This demo attempts to port the original arcade game home to the Genesis. It currently only has the first stage and 2 levels from the second stage. The bosses aren't in yet, nor is the ninja magic. Overall, Trifon has done a really good job, especially considering the color limitations of the Genesis compared to the arcade hardware. The music is pretty faithful, sounding exactly like the arcade, except for the beeps in the game over tune. The sound effects are a bit quiet and fuzzy, but other than that, they're accurate. Work on this port has been very slow, and I'm sure Trifon has his reasons. I just hope that we get to see it finished, and what we have here so far is pretty great. Shinobi also came to the Neo Geo from Hoffman. This is the entire game here, and it appeared out of nowhere, already complete. It's about time the Neo Geo got a real arcade game. I gotta say, this is pretty damned impressive. For the most part, this is exactly like the Sega 16 arcade version. Well, except for maybe the ways in which it's different. You certainly won't notice any of these differences unless you're quite familiar with the arcade original. And I am, since I have the arcade board of the game. So, what are the differences? For one, the colors are ever so slightly different since the Neo Geo's colors don't match one-to-one with the arcade. That means it may appear slightly darker, but unless you put them side by side like this, you're never gonna notice. Sometimes there's a tiny bit of slowdown, but it's rare. I swear that you throw your stars at a slightly slower rate than the arcade, but yeah, I don't know. I think I might be imagining that. The most noticeable difference is in the audio. The music sounds pretty much perfect, and it's even in full mono, just like the arcade. But the voices are a bit rougher. Take a listen.
Mission 1, finished. Welcome to bonus stage.
Mission 1, finished. Welcome to bonus stage.
It's possible this port was based on the crappier System 16A version of the arcade rather than the 16B version that all the real Gs play. The 16A version had worse audio. Also, it makes the clang sound whenever you kill an enemy that's usually reserved for the blade guys that guard the kids. Hoffman says that unfortunately this can't be fixed. Also, for whatever reason, the boss of Stage 1 busts a nut when he dies. You doing okay there, buddy? The boss of Stage 4 also does this. It's too bad that the helicopter boss from Stage 2 doesn't do this. I was kind of hoping it would. Just like in the arcade, you can't continue in the last stage. Well, unless you go into the BIOS when you boot the game. Here, you can set up certain dips that weren't in the arcade, like cheats and also the ability to continue in Mission 5. Overall, this is an awesome port of the arcade to the Neo Geo. Very well done. Hoffman later brought over Golden Axe to the Neo Geo, but I'll check that out next time. Here's Double Dragon on the Neo Geo from Casa de Ruivo. Yeah, the Neo Geo already has a game called Double Dragon, which is a one-on-one fighting game. But this Double Dragon aims to bring the arcade original to the console, or at least a rendition of it. So far, only Stage 1 is playable at the time I'm making this video, and I mostly like what I see in here. There's a how-to play screen before you begin, just like most games on the Neo Geo. The button mapping isn't accurate to how the gameplay actually is, but this is an early build, so that's fine. Generally, the fighting feels pretty good so far. You punch, kick, and jump. You can also jump kick, but I found that to be somewhat tricky to do sometimes. You also have special moves like your backward elbow smash. You can also pick up and throw things and use weapons like a whip. You do get stunned when an enemy hits you, so you're frozen for a sec. I do wish that I were frozen for less time. I wish that the enemies had life bars, but I also understand that the original game didn't have that. At the end of the stage, you fight the Abobo, and the demo ends after he dies. The graphics look great on the Neo Geo, but they're not entirely original. The sprites are mostly from the iOS version, the backgrounds are from Karate Blazers, the Punishers, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, and other versions of Double Dragon. The music is awesome, and it's done by Vomitron. It's streamed, so that means it's in mono. It'll be really awesome to see how this one develops going forward. Here's Sonic Robo Blast 2 on the mighty 32X from all of these talented people. This is a port of a fan-made PC game that's over 20 years old now. Its graphical engine was based on Doom. Since Doom Resurrection made it over to the 32X, and I covered that one the last time by the way, that allowed a port of this game to show up on the hardware here. It's pretty amazing playing a 3D Sonic game on the add-on. It might be a little too ambitious though, as the performance can be pretty bad. I mean, it gets extremely rough in some spots, check it out. I've also come across a couple of random freezes. Oops. You can play 2 full stages plus a boss fight here, and the stages are quite large with lots of hidden areas. They can be a bit confusing to navigate sometimes due to the visuals and not really having a clue where to go, but you will eventually find the end of the stage. There's also a special stage in here which I'm not sure how to access. Collecting 50 rings and making it to the end of the stage doesn't do it. I mean, it should, but it doesn't. I'm sure there's something somewhere in the stage that I need to find. But this is only a taste, as the developers say they want to finish it. I kinda think maybe they should dial things back a bit just to make it run a touch faster, but I don't know, hopefully everything improves. I mean, the draw distance here is insane for the 32X. Also, the 32X is doing all of the graphics here. The Genesis isn't helping out at all. The Genesis seems to do the music though, and it's fantastic. I mean, it sounds just as good or maybe even better than some legitimate Sonic games. I'm glad I finally got to play a 3D Sonic game on my 32X. This right here is full of way more ambition than Sega had even during the Saturn years when it comes to Sonic. I can't wait to see how the finished product turns out. This is Open Lara on the 32X from Xproger. Hope I said that right. Basically, the concept of Open Lara is porting the first Tomb Raider game to every console possible, including the 32X here. Gotta say, this is pretty amazing so far, and it's not even entirely optimized. The frame rate can be a little rough sometimes, but overall it's mostly playable. I'm not sure how much of the game is here because I generally suck at Tomb Raider, but I know it's not the entire thing. I do like how it's running full screen. That right there is pretty impressive. I hope to see this finish someday, even if I know that I'll never be able to make it very far in the game myself. Guess what? That's right, I've got some more homebrew stuff to show you. But since we just saw something on the Sega 32X, let's step it up to the Sega Saturn. This is Cube Cat on the Saturn, and it was made by these fine people. You play as a cubically shaped cat, and your goal is to get to the goal. This is so much easier said than done. You can move, double jump, and dash. You can also collect bells if you want. You can play with analog controls, but you have to enable them in the options screen. Gameplay-wise, there's not much here yet. The controls are currently very slippery. Some of these levels can't be completed unless there's some cryptic thing I need to do that I'm not realizing. Like, what is this thing here? Why doesn't it do anything? I probably need to do something with it, but hell if I know what. I lost interest kind of fast, but maybe this can develop into something good. And hey, at least the homebrew community isn't afraid of doing 3D on the console. That is commendable right there. Another Saturn game is Hellslave from XL2. The title screen has no title. At first I thought that maybe this isn't my cup of tea, but no. This is freaking awesome! As you begin, you set up your deathmatch rules, like how many bots there are and how many kills are needed to win. Then off you go, trying to get as many kills as you can in the stage before anyone else gets them. You can pick up various weapons which have limited ammo, and you can switch between them. And you can even find portals that will teleport you somewhere else on the map. If you have too many bots in a stage, things can get very chaotic. I found that depending on the size of the particular arena, 2 or 3 bots worked best. Of course, the analog controller is supported. What's more is that this can even be enjoyed in multiplayer split screen mode. Up to 4 players can play on a single screen. What is this, the Nintendo 64? Get out of here. The visuals are incredibly impressive. There's phenomenal lighting everywhere, and dear God, that draw distance is just mind-blowing. The frame rate can chug here and there, but you may find yourself not caring because you're blown away that everything is running on a Saturn. Top it off with some incredible music and you have an amazing experience. This build is still classified as a demo. Man, I can't even imagine what they plan to add. Something like this would have blown everyone away had it been released in the Saturn's own time. I demand that someone go back in time and release this in 1996. March or maybe April is best for me. Make it happen. This is Grand Theft Auto 3 for the Sega Dreamcast? That's right, a large group of extremely talented people made it work for the console. To get it working, you need to have the PC version of the game and then jump through a few hoops to patch it and then make a CDI image which will then run on a Dreamcast which can run such images, like one with an ODE. You can even burn a disc, but it's been so long since I've done that with this system. Seeing Grand Theft Auto 3 run here is truly a sight to behold. Supposedly, the game actually did start here on the Dreamcast before moving to the PlayStation 2. But from what I hear, it didn't get very far and it was going to be another one of those top-down games. So this not only impresses me, but it also makes me sad that the console missed out on this in its own time. As you can see here, the console doesn't have much of an issue running the game. In fact, it more than holds its own against the PlayStation 2 version here. It runs in a higher resolution for one, whereas the PS2 game doesn't support 480p. I think the biggest issue is the poor camera control that happens sometimes. You can still adjust it by holding X on the analog stick, but it's not elegant. What can you do? Some of the audio can also occasionally be a bit glitchy here and there, but certainly nothing game-breaking.
I know a place on the edge of the red light district where we can lay low, but my hands are all messed up, so you better drive, brother.
Other than that, it's a tremendous job so far. Keep in mind that I make these videos a couple of months in advance before I release them, so this may have even been updated since this version by the time you see this. This also has some cool options from the PC version. You can play it in a variety of aspect ratios, and it works pretty well in 16:9 widescreen. It doesn't drop the frame rate much, if at all. And it is wider, not cropped, so that's pretty damned cool. If you recall, the PlayStation 2 and Xbox widescreen modes are cropped. Hell yeah, Dreamcast in your face, bitches! The game has those same trails that the other versions did, and this really makes the frame rate take a hit. Plus, they look horrible. They always have. They used to make me sick. Fortunately, trails can be turned off. You can save to the VMU, and it displays various stats from the game as it's running, which is a super cool idea. I always hate seeing this stuff on screen in a game, but I'm still curious, so this solution couldn't be better. This is amazing. If you can, check it out.
Unlike those other exercise machines that require you to be awake, Dormicron actually exercises you overnight. Let's learn a little bit more about it.
I've tried everything, and I just couldn't keep those extra 200 pounds off. It started to affect my marriage.
She was too big for me, and I'll sleep with anything.
You don't.
Also on the Dreamcast is Doom 64 from J.N. Martin 84. This game was originally on the Nintendo 64, hence the name, but I could never really get into it there because I couldn't see a damn thing even with the brightness maxed out. Here on the 128-bit Dreamcast, everything is much better. Remember when they briefly advertised the Dreamcast as 128-bit? Now we get silky smooth 60 frames per second most of the time. Not only that, but you get analog strafing. Everything is easy to see as it should be. The game is so much better here. Basically, the goal of the game is to solve mazes. To do this, you need to find keys to unlock more of the maze, and you can also kill monsters and stuff. But it's really about the mazes. Gamers love mazes. I really don't know what I'm doing in this game, and I still kind of suck at it. Fortunately, there's a features menu which can help you out if your skills are absolutely trash. You can enable invincibility, give yourself those pesky key cards, and all that stuff. Despite not being good at the game, I still have an incredibly fun time here as the gameplay is very well designed. The super smooth frame rate and controls help it make it so much more enjoyable. If I enjoyed finding colored key cards and mazes more than I do, I could easily see this port of this game becoming a favorite of mine. Finally for the Dreamcast is Duke Nukem 3D Atomic Edition, brought over by Ivan Goober. And what can I say, it's Duke Nukem. This one kind of uses a faux dual stick approach similar to the Nintendo 64 Turok games. The analog stick aims while the A, B, X, and Y buttons move you in 4 different and exciting directions. On default, the sensitivity of the look controls is way too high, at least in this version of the port. I personally found that they work best at 3 clicks up from the left using a standard Dreamcast controller. It takes a bit to get used to, and the controls are still a bit squirrely. You'll have to press up on the D-pad to open doors and down to crouch. You can also use the mouse, but I didn't test it despite having a mouse. That's mainly because I'm unbelievably lazy. The game moves pretty well on its default setting, but there's a lot of screen tearing. One downside of this port is that you can't save your game to a VMU because it needs too much space for whatever reason. You can still save, but you need an external IDE or SD save device. As a game, it's still incredibly hard for me to get anywhere. I've never really enjoyed playing this game very much, and the same holds true for me here. But if you like Duke Nukem 3D, then here it is for you on the Sega Dreamcast. Yep, still more homebrew ahead, and we're going to start out with a couple of titles for the TurboGrafx 16, or PC Engine if you prefer, and a lot of people do prefer the name PC Engine. TurboGrafx, PC Engine, which one sounds better? Wow, it's a tough one. Is it really though? This is Special Ninja Squad for the TurboGrafx 16, aka PC Engine, from FG Software. This is a demo of a game that I believe will eventually be sold as a commercial product, but this demo is free. In fact, the demo that you play may be more fine-tuned than the one I'm playing here in early January. So here's the deal. You're a ninja and you have lots of bad guys to kill. You can cut them up with your Blade of Righteousness. The game controls similar to the first Ninja Gaiden on the NES in some ways, mainly the wall jumping mechanic. You can freely climb up and down sections with ladders, but you're absolutely glued to the non-ladder walls. You slash with your sword, and you have other weapons that you can get which have limited use before they go away. You can swap them out with a select button. As you dispense your own brand of justice, you'll steal the enemy's money after they die. I mean, they don't need it. There are several shops throughout any stage. Just stand in front of it and press down to purchase the item if you want it. The graphics are very detailed and quite pleasant, and the music has that flair which only the PC Engine can produce. I love it. This first stage is pretty tough as of the demo I'm playing, but game balancing is still happening. It can be hard not to get hit, and you do bounce back when that happens, which makes it tougher. But I'm quite sure that the first stage here will be more welcoming once everything is done. This is the invasion of the Stasta Star People, working title. It's like Jumping Flash, and it's for the PC Engine from Gorimuchu. It's really early, but it's completely playable, and it's impressive that this even exists. I mean, it's pushing polygons. The PC in PC Engine stands for Polygon Champion. You shoot all of the things in a stage that you need to, then you finish it all by shooting the main thing. I mean, I think that's what's going on anyway. Then off to the next stage. I'm following this one with great interest, and I hope that it can get some music as well. This is Former Dawn on the NES from Something Nerdy Studios. This demo is another game that will have a physical release that you can buy in the future. It's an RPG, though it does have a fair share of action in it. They're really doing some interesting things with the NES here. The game uses its own mapper, and that also supplies some expansion audio, which is responsible for most of the music. The graphics are done in a similar way to the old hold and modify technique that gives the appearance of more colors. It works best on a CRT, of course, and you need to see it at 60 frames per second, but I'm editing this in a way so that you can see the intended colors even if you're watching this video at 30 frames per second. That's GameSack for you. The demo ends after this turn-based crab battle, win or lose. I've done both. It's really cool to see what they're doing with the console, and the finished game should be awesome. This is Hayato's Journey on the Genesis from Master Linkui, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is a spiritual sequel to Gaiden, which is one of my favorite games on the Master System.
Hayato Journey ya Gaiden Story.
This one borrows a ton of assets, very little here is original. It's still pretty cool though. You slash with your sword and you can even collect projectile weapons and special attacks, but those are limited. The music was made new for this game, but much of it is arranged from other games. That's cool, I like these tunes.
Thank you, Hayato-san.
The sound effects are also really cool, but they shift left and right seemingly at random. This might be because the percussion in the music will go to the left or right speakers at some points and it's forced to take the sound effects with it. I like the graphical layering they do, it looks cool. Wow, I'm sure saying cool a lot. What isn't cool though is the level design. This stage with the Legend of Kage music is chock full of gaps and naturally you bounce way back when anything touches you. It's not fun at all. I've tried this stage many times and I've only made it past once. This is only version 1.0 though, so I hope that there are some big fixes coming.
Help me.
Here's Mega Splatterhouse on the Genesis from Cyberdias. It's a port of the arcade game, that's right, the first game in the series. Only 2 levels are here so far, but more are definitely coming. The graphics are quite faithful, and the music has been arranged. It sounds great. One thing I really like are the sounds of the monsters and ghouls moaning in pain everywhere. That's a huge touch that was sadly missing from the TurboGrafx 16 port, but of course I can understand why a 2 meg game from 1989 didn't have these sounds. I'm very interested to see how this one progresses along, and I'm super stoked to hear the musical arrangements for the upper levels. This is definitely worth a play if you like Splatterhouse, that is if it's not too scary for you. Or how about Mega R-Type, also for the Genesis? It's from the Robos. This one aims to remake the arcade version of the original R-Type game for the system. 4 levels are playable here in this demo. What I really like are the extensive configuration options that you can choose from before your game begins. You have your choice of soundtrack, the first being the arcade music. Now, I don't think that the arcade music ever sounded particularly good, but I'm still impressed that the Genesis can mimic it so closely. There's also an arranged soundtrack that's far more upbeat with much better sound quality. The TurboGrafx-16 version still has the best music though. One of the stages here is the special stage from the Master System port of the game, which has been ignored in all other versions. It's great to see it here with added parallax scrolling, and both the arcade and arranged music sound great. You can also play as a Leo prototype ship that doesn't use a force. By the way, the force is that little round ball you command in the game. Speaking of which, the physics of the force thingy are pretty off in this version. For example, I should be able to shoot it into the boss's stomach here, but it keeps trying to follow me. No, stop it! That's not how you're supposed to work! Another time I was able to do it, but it got stuck behind the boss. Oh well, this is just a demo. Of course, I'm really looking forward to the finished product. Windjammers is even coming to the Genesis, and it's from these guys. Basically, it's fancy Pong. Just like the original Neo Geo game that this one is being ported from, this one sucks ass in single player mode because it is absolutely brutal. But with 2 players, this game is incredibly fun and addictive. The conversion here so far is looking fantastic. The details and colors are spot on, and even the scaling of the disc is perfect. The bonus round is here too, and look at that, the dog scales up and down when he jumps. It looks fantastic. The characters now have super cool transparent shadows instead of the dumb flickering shadows that the wimpy Neo Geo has. Oh, and the music here is excellent as well. Keep an eye out for this one, and please bring a friend to play, and you will both have a blast. Okay, let's finish up with some hacks. Now, generally I prefer hacks that improve a game rather than ones that add new levels and basically remake the game in the entirety, so that's what we're going to take a look at. Here's a great hack for Zombies Ate My Neighbors on the Genesis. Normally as you play this one, you have this ugly black bar on the right side of the screen and the map is permanently there. However, the play area is identical to the Super Nintendo version thanks to the resolution increase. This patch from Palmette removes the black bar and increases the viewable area. That's right, there's more viewable area than the Super NES version too. The map is still permanently there, but that's fine, it's not intrusive at all. That's all that this patch does, and it's a pretty cool improvement, I say. Here's Road Rash on the Genesis. This game is cool for a number of reasons, but one of those reasons is that it uses real software scaling for the sprites and it has some cool hills. This comes at a price though, as it usually runs between 10 and 12 frames per second max. Well, a hack called Road Rash Improvement by Ty improves the frame rate. Not much, but now it runs around 15 frames per second. Can you tell the difference in this exciting side-by-side comparison? It also lets you use a CD for the music if you have a Sega CD. Pretty cool. A similar hack with these very same improvements also exists for Road Rash 2 here. Oh, and let's not forget about Road Rash 3, where the hack certainly helps as well. But hold up. Ty also built a patch for Road Rash 3 where if you have a Sega CD attached, you get a few more frames per second thanks to the extra CPU. You need a real Sega CD attached. This won't work with flash carts like the Mega EverDrive or the Mega SD. As you can see, I do get a bit of graphical glitchiness with this patch. Still, you go from this, which is the normal game running at the normal frame rate, to this, which is actually much more playable and, of course, easier on the eyes. Don't you agree? Even the Sega CD version of Road Rash gets an enhancement patch that gives the same kind of boost to the performance. Leave it to the hackers to do what the developers couldn't. Or how about Ghostbusters Special Edition 2.0 on the Genesis from Billy Time Games? The original 1990 release of this one didn't have Winston in it for some reason. This patch remedies that, and it does a whole bunch else too. He controls like Peter with normal attributes, but he can also jump pretty dang high. His sprite looks really good, and his portrait screens look even better. They didn't stop with just Winston though. You can even play as Lewis, and he can't take very much damage. Or Janine, who seems pretty normal on the health and the speed and all that. And you can also play as whoever this guy is supposed to be. The README file says Sigma from Mega Man X. The patch also includes a bunch of new cheats if you're interested in those kinds of things, so you should have no issue making it through this one. If you don't use cheats, the game now has a save feature. That way you don't have to play the entire hour or so in a single sitting. Definitely give this patch a go, as it breathes some new life into this already excellent game. This is Golden Axe 32X edition for, well, the 32X, and it's from Jay Visser. This is a hack that you apply to the Genesis version of Golden Axe to make it more like the arcade, and it certainly does that. Basically, what this hack does is replace the Genesis backgrounds with those drawn by the 32X, while the Genesis handles the sprites. The sound and music are unchanged. These backgrounds are now the arcade backgrounds, and they look phenomenal, way better than they do on the Genesis. So you go from something that looks like this to this. Nice. Sadly, that means the loss of the beloved Deb door from the Genesis game. That's right, Deb is gone, Deb is dead. The levels are now a bit more continuous. For example, it doesn't fade out and then back in before the Death Adder fight. Unfortunately, there's still no parallax scrolling, though the arcade game didn't have much of that to begin with. The extra level in its boss fight that was in the Genesis game is now gone, as obviously that one doesn't have an arcade background. The ending is the same as the Genesis. Also, the eyeball on the turtle that didn't move on the Genesis now moves on the 32X. Not only that, but the eye on the eagle that didn't move on the Genesis also moves on the 32X. 32-bit power! I think if Sega had done a 32X Golden Axe themselves, they would have had the Genesis do the backgrounds while the 32X does the sprites, which is the opposite of how it's done here. As a result, I'm pretty sure it would have looked a lot less like the arcade than this does. Awesome job, Jay Visser. Here's Dracula X, Nocturne in the Moonlight on the Saturn, otherwise known as Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is the ultimate patch released by Paul Matt at the very beginning of 2024. This is definitely a fantastic enhancement. The original unpatched game was pretty rough. It was a quick and dirty port of the PlayStation original, it didn't play to any of the Saturn's strengths, and it was ported by Konami's arguably weakest studio. The graphics are rough throughout, and dithered mesh was used in lieu of transparencies. It looks bad. It also stayed in Japan and was never translated to English. A patch existed to fix some of the game's flaws, and another patch that features a translation to English with the text and voice from the PSP port of the game. First of all, this patch restores a lot of the transparencies. Gone is the dithered mesh, at least in many cases. It sure makes these giant skull heads look a lot less ridiculous, don't you think? Even Alucard's echo shadows behind him lose their dither and look better, though they're not transparent. That's perfectly fine. Monsters exploding as they die look a ton better. Even any on-screen text windows and the like are now transparent. Seriously, there was no excuse for the game not to look like this when it was originally released. There's still plenty of dithered mesh in here though, like the mist form that you can transform into. Or the clouds. Most of the water remains a mesh as well. Another thing that was done was to remove the black bars that sometimes exist on the bottom and always on the top of the screen. However, in some areas this results in odd-looking graphics at the very top or bottom. For example, here you can see the clouds moving above the wall when you shouldn't be able to, but most of the time it's perfectly fine. The original PlayStation game had the black bars on both the top and the bottom for the entire game, and nobody complained, so I'm not sure why this one needs to get rid of them. There have been lots of minor adjustments and restorations done to many of the graphics as well, like adding a bit of color to the map to indicate the loading rooms. These are now gray. Granted, on the Saturn, these rooms don't load at all. You always get a now loading screen after them, unlike the PlayStation game. That's what you get when you use Konami's weakest studio. Also, they messed up the map a bit. Like, for example, where is the entrance to this room? The entrances exist in the unpatched game, but here you wouldn't know which side to enter just judging from the map. Basically, it's hiding the entrances to the hidden rooms. But that doesn't make any sense because by the time they show up on the map, you've already found them. In the unpatched game, in order to access the map, you first had to pause it to enter the menu screen, then press the L button to view the map. Why? Well, now you can directly access the map screen, but you need to press up and start simultaneously. That means you need to be careful if you want to check where you are in a warp room or you're going to accidentally warp again. The load times from the game to the menu or map and back have been greatly decreased, which is nice since you tend to access the map a lot. You can use a 4MB RAM card if you want, and it makes those transitions to the menu a little bit faster still. This is all very welcome, but make no mistake, it still has nothing on the PlayStation version where pressing the select button brings up the map instantly on top of everything. What the hell, Konami's weakest studio? Why does it need to go to a black screen? Other things that were added were a hard mode, and also Richter's alternate costume is automatically on him if you choose to play as him. If you want the original, and in my personal opinion much better costume, you need to press up while selecting him. And in case you didn't know, the Saturn port also lets you play as Maria right from the beginning. There are 2 exclusive stages that were made just for the Saturn which haven't appeared anywhere else, yet. These aren't amazing or long stages by any means, but they're something, I suppose. And let's not forget that both of these new stages have an upside-down version as well. These are fun to play through, but I don't think they're a good enough reason to choose the Saturn version over the PlayStation. The English translation is great and, naturally, makes it much more accessible for English-speaking people. Some of the voices remain in Japanese, usually anything spoken during a boss battle. Also, the librarian dialogue is all in Japanese except for when you first meet him. I do wish that they used the original English PlayStation voices instead of the PSP retranslation, mainly so we could hear Dracula say his catchphrase.
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets!
Still, I had never played through the PSP translation until now, so it was interesting for me to see and hear it.
Do you know the name Richter Belmont?
Belmont? Of course. Why?
Still, all in all, this is a great patch, and it's worth a playthrough just to see the differences that this version offers. But it's best if you play the PlayStation version first, as that's still the definitive version of the game. And there you go, more hacks and homebrews for you to try. And this is the part of the video that most people skip over to get to the after credits end sketch. But if you are actually watching and listening to this right now, well then you get $500. No, actually you don't. Anyway, let me know of any hacks and homebrews that I should try, and in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
It's time for the Game Master!
Welcome back to another exciting episode of The Game Master, where I help you with all of your video game troubles here in the year 1992. Our first letter today comes from Rad Ricky, who is in New Hampshire. Ricky writes, "Dear Game Master, in Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis, I have trouble keeping all of my coins. Any tips?" Well, Ricky, who is rad, it sure is annoying when Sonic loses all of his coins, isn't it? They go bouncing everywhere while you scramble to recover as many coins as you can. But as always, Ricky, I am here to help. While playing Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis, simply don't touch any enemies or other hazards. This way, Sonic can keep all of the coins that you collect. Well, Ricky, you're now a better human being than you were 30 seconds ago. You're welcome. Our next letter today comes from Joey from Ohio or Omaha, I don't know. Joey writes, "Dear Game Master, I hate you and your stupid face so much. It makes me sick. In Dirty Harry on Nintendo, how do I get across the big gaps in the rocky part of Alcatraz Island?" Joey, what you want to do is go into your menu screen and select the rope. Then get out of the menu screen and then press the button to automatically throw and swing the rope across the gaps. Our next letter today comes from Susan from Nantucket, Wisconsin. Susan writes, "Dear Game Master," that's me, "I'm having a really hard time with the third dungeon in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for Super Nintendo. I can't get past the room with the Helmasaur and the Hard Hat Beetle. What do I do?" Susan, this is 1992. Girls do not play video games. Stop it. Oh, and go to hell, Susan. Our final letter today comes from Timmy from New Florida. Timmy writes, "Dear Game Master, you are a fraud who knows nothing about video games. You cheat on your taxes, steal food from homeless people, and I know you murdered that prostitute back in 1990, and I have the security footage to prove it." Well, Timmy, it sounds like someone needs a 30 lives code for Gradius 3 on Super Nintendo. At the title screen, hold left, press A 3 times, and then hit start. And that's all the time the Game Master has this week. See you next time.